Hello, my dear friends. Today, I'm sharing a story that will touch your heart. A story about unexpected love, choices, and how life often unfolds in ways we can't predict. My name is Jason, and this is the story of someone very special to me, my wife, Emily, and how we met. Let me start from the very beginning. I wasn't always the guy who believed in love at first sight. In fact, I was quite the opposite. To me, love was something that developed over time, like a friendship slowly transforming into something deeper. But life, as you know, has its own plans. I was 25 when this story began. I had just completed my degree in architecture and landed a job in a small, picturesque town nestled between rolling hills and a beautiful lake. It was the kind of place you'd only see in postcards, peaceful, warm, and inviting. Moving there was a big step for me. I had grown up in a busy city and wasn't sure how I'd adjust to the quiet life. On my very first day in town, I decided to explore a bit before starting my new job. I walked through the cobblestone streets, past small cafes and shops with hand-painted signs. That's when I saw her. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe, her auburn hair catching the sunlight like fire, her eyes focused on a book she held delicately in her hands. I didn't know it then, but that moment changed everything. Being the socially awkward guy I was, I didn't approach her right away. Instead, I found myself sitting at the cafe a few tables away, ordering coffee I didn't even want just to stay close. I kept glancing at her, hoping she wouldn't notice, but she did. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Is the coffee good here?" Her voice was soft, yet confident. Caught off guard, I stammered, Yeah, it's great. First time here, though." "That makes two of us," she replied with a laugh. Her name was Emily. She had just moved to town, too, for a teaching job at the local school. We struck up a conversation that day, talking about our favorite books, our dreams, and why we had chosen this little town to start fresh. It felt so natural, like talking to someone I'd known my whole life. Before I knew it, hours had passed, and the sun was beginning to set. Neither of us wanted the conversation to end, so we agreed to meet again the next day, and the day after that. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I became inseparable. We explored the town together, went hiking by the lake, and spent countless evenings talking about everything under the stars. She was funny, intelligent, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. One evening, as we sat by the lake, watching the water shimmer under the moonlight, she said something that caught me off guard. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Why?" "Because meeting you feels like it was meant to happen," she said, looking at me with a vulnerability that made my heart skip a beat. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that I felt the same way. Things moved quickly after that. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, and before long, I couldn't imagine my life without her. But then came a moment that tested everything. It was a rainy evening when she brought up the topic of marriage. Not in a formal, let's talk about our future kind of way, but more like a passing comment. "Do you think you'll ever get married?" she asked, twirling her hair absent-mindedly. "Maybe one day," I replied. "Why?" She paused, then said, "Because I think I want to marry you." Her words left me speechless. We had only known each other for a few months, and while I felt deeply for her, the idea of marriage had never crossed my mind. But the look in her eyes told me she was serious. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a few days to think it over. During that time, I realized something important. Life doesn't always give you second chances. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and trust your heart. So one sunny afternoon, I took her to the same cafe where we had first met. Nervously, I pulled out a small, simple ring I had bought the day before. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling, "will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she said, "Yes." We got married in a small ceremony a few weeks later, with just a handful of friends and family. It wasn't extravagant or fancy, but it was perfect. Standing there holding her hand, I knew I had made the right choice. Now, years later, as I sit here sharing this story, I can confidently say that marrying the first person I met in this town was the best decision of my life. Emily and I have built a beautiful life together, filled with love, laughter, and countless memories. Life after the wedding was like stepping into a dream. Emily and I rented a small, cozy house just outside town. It had a garden with wildflowers that she adored and a little porch where we'd sit in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the hills. It wasn't much, but to us, it was home. The first few months were magical. We were still in that phase where everything felt new, cooking dinner together, decorating our little home, and learning about each other's quirks. Emily loved music and would often hum tunes while making breakfast, while I had a habit of leaving my socks everywhere, much to her playful annoyance. But as with any marriage, reality eventually set in. Emily was passionate about her job as a teacher, but the workload was heavier than she had anticipated. Long days at school left her exhausted, and sometimes she'd come home on the verge of tears, overwhelmed by the demands of her students and the school administration. Meanwhile, my job as an architect wasn't without its challenges either. I was working on a big project that required long hours and constant revisions. There were days when I'd come home late, too tired to even hold a proper conversation. It wasn't long before the cracks began to show. One evening, after a particularly rough day at work, Emily and I had our first big argument. She had been waiting for me to come home for dinner, but I had stayed late at the office without letting her know. When I finally walked through the door, she looked upset. "Jason, you could have at least called," she said, her voice tense. "I know. I'm sorry," I replied, dropping my bag on the floor. "I lost track of time." "That's the problem," she snapped. "You're always losing track of time. Do you even care how I feel, sitting here alone every evening?" Her words stung, but instead of addressing her feelings, I let my frustration take over. "Emily, I'm working hard for us. Do you think I enjoy staying late at the office?" The argument escalated, with both of us saying things we didn't mean. That night, for the first time since we got married, we went to bed without speaking. The silence between us the next morning was unbearable, I hated seeing her hurt, and I knew I had to make things right. After work, I stopped by the flower shop and picked up a bouquet of her favorite daisies. When I got home, she was sitting on the couch, reading. "Emily," I said, holding out the flowers. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. You're the most important thing in my life, and I hate that I made you feel otherwise." Her eyes softened as she took the flowers. "I'm sorry too, Jason. I know you're working hard for us. I just miss you sometimes, that's all." That moment taught us an important lesson. Love isn't just about the good times. It's about navigating the challenges together. We promised each other that night to communicate better and to always make time for each other, no matter how busy life got. As the years passed, we faced more challenges, but we also had countless beautiful moments that strengthened our bond. I remember the day we found out Emily was pregnant. She had been feeling nauseous for days, so we decided to take a test. When the result came back positive, she burst into tears, and I felt a wave of emotions I couldn't even begin to describe. Excitement, fear, joy, it was all there. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Emily had morning sickness that seemed to last all day, and she worried constantly about whether we were ready to be parents. But we faced it together, one day at a time. When our daughter Lily was born, it was the happiest day of our lives. Holding her for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. Emily looked radiant, even after hours of labor, and as we sat there with Lily in our arms, I knew we had created something extraordinary. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges, from sleepless nights to figuring out how to balance work and family. But Lily's laughter and the joy she brought into our lives made it all worth it. Looking back now, I realize how much we've grown together. Our love has evolved from the fiery passion of those early days to a deep, unshakable bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. Every relationship has its moments of doubt and struggle, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't about never fighting or always agreeing. It's about showing up for each other, even on the hard days. Emily and I still have our disagreements, but we've learned how to navigate them with kindness and patience. And through it all, our love has only grown stronger. So here I am, years later, still madly in love with the first girl I met in this little town. Some might call it fate. Others might say we were just lucky. But to me, it's a testament to what happens when two people choose to love each other, no matter what. As the years passed, Emily and I found ourselves settling into a rhythm, a life filled with the familiar comforts of routine, yet never dull. Lily was growing up so fast that it felt like time was slipping through our fingers. One moment, she was a baby learning to take her first steps, and the next, she was running through the house, her laughter echoing in every corner. Emily, ever the nurturer, was an amazing mother. She had this way of making even the most mundane moments special, whether it was a bedtime story or a picnic in the backyard. Lily adored her, and I often found myself marveling at how effortlessly Emily managed to balance her job as a teacher with her role as a mother and wife. But even in our happiest times, life had a way of throwing curveballs. It was a cold winter morning when I noticed Emily seemed quieter than usual. She wasn't her usual energetic self, and her laughter, which usually came so easily, seemed forced. At first I thought it was just exhaustion. Between work and raising Lily, anyone would feel drained. But as the weeks went on, her fatigue grew worse. "Emily, you've been so tired lately," I said one evening as we sat on the couch. "Maybe you should see a doctor, just to be sure." "I'm fine, Jason," she replied with a weak smile. "It's probably just stress." But I wasn't convinced. A few days later, after much coaxing, she agreed to go for a checkup. The results weren't what we had hoped. The doctor diagnosed Emily with anemia, a condition that was affecting her energy levels and overall health. While it wasn't life-threatening, it required immediate attention. I could see the worry in her eyes as the doctor explained the treatment plan, but I took her hand and promised we'd face it together. Supporting Emily through her recovery became my priority. I adjusted my work schedule so I could be home more often, helping with Lily and taking over household chores. Emily, being the strong and determined woman she was, tackled her health challenges head-on. Slowly but surely, she started to regain her strength. This period, though difficult, brought us even closer. It reminded me of why I fell in love with her in the first place: her resilience, her kindness, and her ability to find hope even in tough times. Lily, too, showed us just how much love and strength could come from such a young heart. At just 6 years old, she would draw little "get well soon" cards for Emily and sit by her side, reading her favorite storybooks. Watching them together filled my heart with a gratitude I couldn't put into words. As Emily's health improved, we decided it was time to take a family trip, a way to celebrate her recovery and create new memories. We chose to visit the beach, a place Emily had always loved but hadn't been to in years. The trip was everything we needed and more. We spent our days building sand castles with Lily, collecting seashells, and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. One evening, as we sat on the shore with our feet in the sand, Emily turned to me and said, "Thank you, Jason, for always being my rock." Her words stayed with me. Life had tested us in so many ways, but through it all, we had held on to each other. As the years went by, our lives continued to evolve. Lily grew into a bright, compassionate young woman, and Emily and I found ourselves rediscovering each other as our roles as parents shifted. Now, as I sit here, reflecting on our journey, I realize how lucky I am to have met Emily that day at the cafe. She wasn't just the first person I met in this town. She became my home, my partner, and the love of my life. Some people spend their entire lives searching for a love like ours, and I'm grateful every day that I didn't have to look far. Emily was there, waiting for me, just as I was for her. And so, our story continues. A story of love that started with a simple question over coffee and grew into a lifetime of shared dreams, challenges, and moments that I will cherish forever.